The crying started the moment Emma stepped into the crowded grocery store, and she knew immediately it was going to be one of those days where everything felt impossible. Her 11-month-old daughter, Lily, had been fussy all morning, refusing breakfast and clinging to Emma with a desperation that made even the simplest tasks feel like climbing mountains. Now, surrounded by the harsh fluorescent lights and the overwhelming noise of shopping carts and chatter, the baby's whimpers escalated into full-blown wails that echoed through the produce section. "SHH, sweetheart, please," Emma whispered, bouncing Lily gently while trying to grab a carton of milk with her free hand. Her purse slipped down her shoulder, nearly spilling its contents across the floor. She caught it just in time, but the movement jostled Lily even more, intensifying the crying. Emma's eyes stung with exhaustion. She had been up since 4 in the morning with a teething baby, had burned the only decent work shirt she owned while ironing it in a sleep-deprived haze, and now stood in line at the store with a screaming infant and a cart full of groceries she desperately needed but could barely afford. The payment card in her wallet represented the last of this week's funds, carefully budgeted down to the final dollar. The checkout line moved with agonizing slowness. Lily's face had turned bright red, tears streaming down her chubby cheeks, and Emma felt the familiar weight of judgment from the other customers. She could feel their stares, hear their sighs of impatience. A woman behind her made an obvious show of switching to another line. "I know, baby, I know," Emma murmured, swaying back and forth. "We'll be home soon." Finally, mercifully, it was her turn. The cashier, a teenage boy who looked supremely uncomfortable with the crying baby, began scanning items at what felt like a deliberately slow pace. Emma tried to dig into her purse for her wallet with one hand while holding Lily with the other, but it was impossible. Everything she needed seemed to have sunk to the bottom of the bag. "That'll be $73.48, the cashier announced, already looking past her to the next customer. Emma's heart raced. She needed both hands to find her card, but Lily was thrashing now, arching her back in that way babies do when they are truly upset. Setting her down would make everything worse. The diaper bag slipped from Emma's shoulder, and she fumbled to catch it, nearly dropping her purse in the process. "Just 1 second," she said, hearing the desperate edge in her own voice. The people behind her were definitely getting impatient now. She could feel their irritation like a physical presence pressing against her back. Lily's cries reached a new pitch, the kind that made Emma want to cry herself. "I'm so sorry," she said to no one in particular, still struggling with her purse. Then, from beside her, a calm voice cut through the chaos. "Can I help?" Emma turned to see a man standing in the adjacent line, looking at her with an expression of genuine concern rather than annoyance. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and striking blue eyes that seemed kind despite the expensive cut of his charcoal suit. Even in her frazzled state, Emma registered that he looked distinctly out of place in this modest neighborhood grocery store, like someone who should have been shopping somewhere far more upscale. I just need to get my wallet," Emma stammered, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. The man glanced at Lily, whose little face was scrunched up and tear-stained, then back at Emma. "Would it help if I held her for a moment, while you pay?" Emma's first instinct was to refuse. You did not just hand your baby to strangers. That was parenting rule number 1. But something about his expression, about the genuine offer of help with no trace of judgment, made her hesitate. She was drowning here, and he was throwing her a lifeline. "Are you sure?" she asked, and even she could hear the doubt mixed with desperate hope in her voice. "Absolutely," he said, already setting down his own basket and stepping closer. "I have nephews. I'm used to the crying." There was something reassuring about the way he held out his arms, confident but not presumptuous. Emma made a split-second decision born of pure necessity and carefully transferred Lily into the stranger's arms. The baby, surprised by the sudden change, stopped crying for a moment, blinking up at this new person with wide, teary eyes. The man adjusted his hold naturally, supporting her head and back with the ease of someone who genuinely had experience with babies. "Hey there," he said softly to Lily, his voice taking on a gentle quality. "Your mama just needs a minute, okay?" With both hands free, Emma quickly dug through her purse and found her wallet. Her fingers shook slightly as she pulled out her card and handed it to the cashier, who swiped it without comment. Emma watched the stranger from the corner of her eye as the transaction processed. He was swaying slightly, that universal baby-soothing motion that every parent learned, and Lily had quieted to small, hiccuping breaths, clearly confused but no longer screaming. The receipt printed, and Emma grabbed her card and the paper with one hand while reaching for Lily with the other. "Thank you so much," she said, meaning it with her entire being. "You have no idea how much I needed that." "No problem at all," the man replied, carefully handing Lily back. As he did, their hands brushed, and Emma felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with stress and everything to do with the warmth in his eyes. "She's beautiful, by the way, your daughter." "Thank you," Emma said again, settling Lily back on her hip. The baby immediately buried her face in Emma's shoulder, exhausted from crying. "Really, thank you. I'm sorry for disrupting your shopping." "You didn't disrupt anything," he assured her, and his smile was genuine. "I'm glad I could help." Emma wanted to say more, wanted to explain that this simple kindness had meant more to her than he could possibly know. But the cashier was already calling for the next customer, and she was blocking the way. She offered the stranger one more grateful smile before grabbing her bags and heading toward the exit, Lily's weight familiar and comforting against her chest. She did not look back, too focused on navigating the parking lot with her bags and baby and the last shreds of her composure. It was not until she had strapped Lily into her car seat and loaded the groceries into the trunk of her old sedan that Emma allowed herself to take a deep breath. That man had been kind. Truly kind, in a way that felt rare these days. Emma realized she had not even asked his name. She climbed into the driver's seat and glanced back at Lily, who had finally fallen asleep, her little fists curled up by her face. "Well, baby girl," Emma murmured, "at least there are still some good people in the world." As she drove home to their small apartment, Emma tried to push the encounter from her mind. It had been a moment of kindness from a stranger, nothing more. She would never see him again. That was how these things worked. What Emma did not know was that the stranger, whose name was Daniel Carter, stood in the parking lot watching her car pull away with an expression of thoughtfulness that his business associates would have found very unusual. He had memorized the grateful smile she had given him, the way her green eyes had lit up with relief, and the fierce protectiveness with which she held her daughter. Daniel Carter was not accustomed to being moved by chance encounters. As the CEO of Carter Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the state, he spent his days making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. He was known for his sharp business acumen, his relentless work ethic, and his ability to stay detached from emotional complications. But something about the young mother in the grocery store had struck a chord he had not felt in years. Maybe it was the vulnerability in her eyes, or the strength she showed despite clearly being overwhelmed. Maybe it was the way she had trusted him, a complete stranger with her most precious possession because she had no other choice. Daniel returned to his own shopping, but his mind was elsewhere. He found himself hoping, in a way that felt both foolish and genuine, that he might somehow see her again. 3 days later, Emma was running late for work, which seemed to be her permanent state of existence lately. She dropped Lily off at the daycare center with barely a minute to spare, kissed her daughter's soft cheek, and rushed to catch the bus that would take her downtown to the office building where she worked as an administrative assistant. The job was not glamorous, and it certainly did not pay enough to make life easy, but it was stable, and stability was everything when you were a single mother. Emma had learned that lesson the hard way. She thought about Lily's father sometimes, usually late at night when the loneliness felt particularly heavy. Michael had left when Emma was 6 months pregnant, unable to handle the reality of impending parenthood. He had talked a good game about wanting a family someday, but someday had apparently not included the actual present tense of a crying baby and midnight feedings, and the sacrifice of his freedom. Emma had been devastated at first, then angry, and finally she had reached a place of weary acceptance. She was better off without someone who did not want to be there. Lily deserved better than a father who saw her as a burden. They both did. The bus arrived, and Emma climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank balance, wincing at the number. Daycare took most of her paycheck, and rent took the rest. Groceries, utilities, and everything else had to be carefully managed, stretched, and sometimes sacrificed entirely. She was tired. Bone-deep tired in a way that sleep never quite fixed. But when she thought about Lily's smile, about the way her daughter's face lit up every time Emma walked into the room, she found the strength to keep going. The office building where Emma worked was downtown, a sleek high-rise that housed several different companies. She worked on the 14th floor for a mid-sized marketing firm, answering phones, managing schedules, and handling the administrative tasks that kept the office running smoothly. Her boss, Margaret, was a woman in her 50s who treated Emma with a brisk efficiency that bordered on coldness. Emma had learned early on not to mention Lily too often or to ask for any flexibility with her schedule. In Margaret's view, personal problems should stay personal, and work should always come first. Emma settled at her desk, logged into her computer, and began working through her morning tasks. She was so focused on responding to emails that she almost missed the commotion in the lobby. "Is he really coming here?" her coworker, Jenna, whispered excitedly, leaning over the cubicle wall. "I heard he's doing some kind of tour of potential partner companies." "Who?" Emma asked, only half paying attention. "Daniel Carter, the CEO of Carter Industries. Apparently, he's looking into acquiring or partnering with some smaller firms, and we're on the list." Margaret has been in a panic all morning trying to make sure everything looks perfect. Emma's fingers paused on her keyboard. Daniel Carter. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she could not place why. "Is that a big deal?" Jenna's eyes widened. "Are you serious? Carter Industries is huge." "He's only like 33, and he built that company from almost nothing after his father died and left it in debt. Now it's worth hundreds of millions. He's basically a legend in the business world." "Oh," Emma said, trying to sound interested. Wealthy CEOs and business legends felt very far removed from her daily reality of overdue bills and clearance rack shopping. "That's impressive." "Impressive?" "Emma, the man is gorgeous too. There was an article about him in Business Monthly last year, and let me tell you, the pictures did not disappoint." Emma smiled despite herself. Jenna was always enthusiastic about something, and her energy was infectious even when Emma was too tired to match it. The morning continued with an undercurrent of nervous energy throughout the office. Margaret swept through multiple times, adjusting things that did not need adjusting and reminding everyone to look professional and busy. Emma kept her head down, focusing on her work and counting the hours until she could pick up Lily and go home. At 11 o'clock, Margaret appeared at Emma's desk with a pinched expression. "Emma, I need you to run down to the lobby and pick up the catering order for the lunch meeting. They're supposed to deliver it, but they just called and said they're short-staffed. You'll have to go get it." Emma's heart sank. The catering place was 6 blocks away and she was supposed to be covering the phones. Right now. Yes, right now. Forward the phones to Jenna. "We need that food here by 11:30, no exceptions. This is an important day, Emma. Don't mess it up." There was no point in arguing. Emma grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator, trying not to feel resentful about being sent on an errand that really should have been handled by the catering company. This was her job, she reminded herself. Doing whatever was needed, even when it was inconvenient. The day was warm, and Emma walked quickly, her mind already calculating how fast she would need to move to make it back in time. She reached the catering place, picked up the order of sandwiches and salads, and headed back toward the office building with 2 large bags that were heavier than they looked. She was halfway across the lobby, struggling with the bags and trying to reach the elevator call button, when disaster struck. One of the bags tore, and containers started to tumble toward the polished marble floor. "No, no, no," Emma gasped, trying to catch falling containers while still holding the other bag. Strong hands appeared in her field of vision, catching containers before they hit the ground. Emma looked up, ready to thank whatever kind stranger had helped her, and froze. It was him. The man from the grocery store. The one who had held Lily while Emma paid. He looked just as handsome as she remembered, maybe more so now that she was not in the middle of a complete meltdown. He was dressed in another expensive suit, this one a deep navy that made his eyes seem even bluer, and he was smiling at her with recognition and something that looked almost like pleasure. "We have to stop meeting like this," he said, his voice warm with humor as he helped her secure the containers. "With you juggling too many things at once." Emma felt her face flush bright red. Hi, incredibly articulate, she thought, really knocked that one out of the park. "Hi," he replied, still smiling. "It's good to see you again. How's your daughter?" "She's good. Great, actually. Much less screaming than last time." Emma tried to organize the containers back into the torn bag, but it was hopeless. "I'm sorry, I'm making a mess in the middle of the lobby." "Here," Daniel said, taking charge of the situation in a way that felt natural rather than overbearing. He grabbed the torn bag and the containers, balancing them easily. "Where are you headed?" 14th floor. "But you don't have to. I'm going up anyway," he said, already walking toward the elevator. "Come on." Emma had no choice but to follow, clutching the remaining bag and trying to process what was happening. The man from the grocery store was here in her building, helping her again. What were the odds? They stepped into the elevator together and Daniel pressed the button for the 14th floor before Emma could reach it. "Wait," she said, something clicking into place in her mind. 14th floor. "You're going to the 14th floor." "That's right," he confirmed. "I have a meeting there." Understanding washed over Emma like cold water. The meeting. The important visitor. Daniel Carter, CEO of Carter Industries. The man who had held her baby while she paid for groceries was a millionaire CEO. "Oh my God," Emma said faintly. "You're Daniel Carter." His expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "I am. Though I preferred it when you didn't know that and just looked at me like a normal person." The elevator rose smoothly and Emma's mind raced. This could not be happening. This was the person Margaret had been frantically preparing for all morning, the business legend that Jenna had gushed about. and Emma had handed him her crying baby in a grocery store without having any idea who he was. "I gave you my baby," Emma said, still trying to process. "You did," Daniel agreed, and his smile returned softer this time. "And I'm glad you trusted me enough to do that. I meant what I said at the store. I was happy to help." The elevator dinged, announcing their arrival at the 14th floor. The doors opened to reveal Margaret standing in the lobby area, her expression transforming from anxious to horrified as she saw Emma standing with Daniel Carter, both of them holding bags of catering food. "Mr. Carter," Margaret said, her voice strained with forced pleasantness. "Welcome." "I apologize for the confusion. Emma, I'll take those." She practically snatched the bags from both of them, shooting Emma a look that promised a stern conversation later. Emma stepped back, wanting to disappear into the floor. "Actually," Daniel said, his tone pleasant but with an undertone of authority that made Margaret pause. "Emma was helping me with these after a small accident in the lobby. She's been very helpful." Margaret's expression flickered with confusion, but she was too well trained in corporate politeness to question it. "How wonderful. Well, please, Mr. Carter, right this way. We have the conference room prepared for you." Daniel allowed himself to be led away but glanced back at Emma with a small smile before disappearing around the corner. Emma stood frozen in the elevator lobby, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with rushing to get the catering order. Jenna appeared at her elbow immediately. "Emma, what just happened? Why were you in the elevator with Daniel Carter?" "It's complicated," Emma managed, still staring at the spot where he had disappeared. "He was carrying catering bags. The CEO of a multi-million-dollar company was carrying our lunch bags. There was an accident." "He helped." Emma shook her head, trying to clear it. "Jenna, I need to get back to work before Margaret kills me." But as Emma returned to her desk, she could not focus on anything. Her mind kept replaying the encounter, the way Daniel had smiled at her, the way he had remembered Lily and asked about her. He had not acted like a powerful CEO in that moment. He had just been a kind person helping someone who needed it, the same way he had been in the grocery store. Emma told herself it did not matter. Men like Daniel Carter did not end up with women like her. He probably had a girlfriend, someone sophisticated and successful who fit into his world of business meetings and expensive suits. The grocery store had been a chance encounter, and today had been a coincidence, nothing more. But she could not quite silence the small, hopeful voice in her head that whispered what if. The lunch meeting stretched into the afternoon, and Emma tried to stay focused on her work, despite the distraction of knowing Daniel was somewhere in the building. She answered calls, organized files, and did her best to avoid Margaret, who still looked stressed and probably blamed Emma for something, though Emma was not entirely sure what. At 3:30, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from the daycare. "Lily has a slight fever. Not high, but you might want to pick her up early if possible." Emma's stomach dropped. A fever meant Lily could not go to daycare tomorrow, which meant Emma would have to miss work, which Margaret would absolutely not be understanding about. She texted back that she would be there soon, then approached Margaret's office with dread. Her boss was on the phone, but she waved Emma in impatiently. Emma waited until she hung up, then spoke quickly. "Margaret, I'm so sorry, but I need to leave a little early. The daycare just called and Lily has a fever. They want me to pick her up." Margaret's expression hardened. "Emma, today of all days, we have an important guest in the building and I need all hands on deck." "I know, and I'm really sorry, but they said she has a fever." "I have to. You always have to leave early or come in late or take time off. Do you know how difficult that makes it to rely on you?" Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting. "I'm running a business here, not a daycare center." Emma felt her throat tighten with frustration and hurt, but she kept her voice steady. I understand, and I do my best to manage everything, but she's my daughter and she's sick. I have to pick her up. Fine. Go. But we're going to need to have a serious conversation about your commitment to this position. Emma nodded stiffly, not trusting herself to speak, and left the office. She grabbed her purse and coat, ignoring Jenna's concerned questions, and headed for the elevator. Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry at work. She would hold it together until she got to her car at least. The elevator arrived and Emma stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. Just as the doors started to close, a hand caught them and they slid open again. Daniel Carter stepped in. They were alone in the elevator and Emma quickly swiped at her eyes, hoping he had not noticed the tears she was desperately trying to suppress. But of course he noticed. His expression shifted immediately from neutral to concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm fine," Emma said automatically, staring at the floor numbers as they descended, "just leaving early." There was a pause and then Daniel said, "You're clearly not fine. What happened?" Emma should have deflected. She should have maintained professional distance. But she was so tired, and he was being so kind, and suddenly, the words were spilling out. "My daughter has a fever and I need to pick her up from daycare, but my boss is upset because apparently being a single parent is inconvenient for the company. And I'm terrified that I'm going to lose this job because I can't work 60 hours a week and never have any emergencies. But I don't have a choice because Lily is my responsibility and I love her more than anything. But it's so hard doing this alone." She stopped, mortified. She had just unloaded on a complete stranger. Worse, a complete stranger who was a CEO and probably thought she was wildly unprofessional. "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly. "I shouldn't have said all that. Please forget it." "Don't apologize," Daniel said firmly. The elevator reached the ground floor, but he pressed the button to hold the doors closed, giving them privacy. "Your boss was upset because you need to care for your sick child. It's not just that. It's everything. I'm always asking for flexibility, and I know it's frustrating for her, but I don't have backup. Lily's father isn't in the picture and my parents passed away before she was born. It's just me." Emma finally met his eyes, and the understanding she saw there made her throat tighten again. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear about my life problems." "What if I want to?" Daniel said quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Emma did not know how to respond. The elevator began to beep, protesting being held, and Daniel released the door button. They walked through the lobby together, and when they reached the street, Daniel turned to her. "Where's your car?" "I take the bus," Emma admitted. "I have to transfer twice to get to the daycare." She saw something flash across his face, some emotion she could not quite identify. Then he said, "Let me drive you." "What? No, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering." He gestured toward the parking garage. "I'm done with my meetings for the day and I have a car sitting idle. Let me help." Emma wanted to refuse. She should refuse. But the thought of getting to Lily faster, of not having to juggle the bus with a feverish baby, was too tempting. "Are you sure?" she asked, hating how hopeful she sounded. "Absolutely sure," Daniel replied, and his smile was warm and genuine. His car, unsurprisingly, was beautiful. A sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Emma made in 3 years. She climbed into the passenger seat, feeling out of place and overwhelmed, and gave him the address of the daycare. As Daniel drove, he asked, "What's your daughter's name? I realized I never learned it." "Lily." "She's 11 months old. That's a beautiful name." He navigated through traffic with easy confidence. "And you're raising her on your own," Emma nodded, watching the city pass by through the window. "Her father left before she was born, decided parenthood was not for him. I'm sorry." That must be incredibly hard. It is, Emma admitted, but she's worth it. Every sleepless night, every struggle, all of it. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Daniel was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "My father died when I was 24. He left the family company to me, but it was drowning in debt and bad decisions. Everyone told me to sell it, to walk away, but I couldn't. It was his legacy, and I felt like I owed it to him to try to save it." Emma turned to look at him, surprised by the personal revelation. That must have been terrifying. It was. I worked 18-hour days for years, learning everything I could, making hard choices, rebuilding from the ground up. There were times I wanted to give up, times I thought I had made a terrible mistake. He glanced at her, and his expression was open in a way that made her heart skip. But I didn't give up, and eventually it worked. The company survived, then thrived. I'm telling you this because I understand what it's like to feel overwhelmed and alone, trying to carry something that feels too heavy. It's not quite the same, Emma said softly. You were building a business empire. I'm just trying to make rent. You're raising a child on your own while working full-time and managing a boss who doesn't appreciate you. That's its own kind of empire, Emma. Don't diminish what you're doing. The kindness in his words, the genuine respect, made Emma's eyes sting again. She was not used to people seeing her life as anything other than a series of struggles and shortcomings. Hearing someone acknowledge the strength it took to keep going meant more than she could express. They reached the daycare center, and Daniel pulled into the parking lot. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt, then hesitated. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes, "for the ride and for being so understanding. You've been incredibly kind to me, and I don't even know why." "Maybe I just want to be," Daniel replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. "Take this. My personal cell number is on there. If you ever need help or even just someone to talk to, call me." Emma took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. I can't imagine why a CEO would want a struggling single mom calling him. "Then you don't see yourself clearly," Daniel said, his voice low and sincere. "I'd very much like it if you called." Before Emma could respond, before she could fully process what was happening, he added, "And Emma, if your boss gives you any trouble about leaving today, let me know. I'd be happy to have a conversation with her about the importance of supporting working parents." Emma managed a shaky smile. "I'm pretty sure that would get me fired immediately. Not if I make it clear that Carter Industries only partners with companies that treat their employees well." He said it casually, but there was steel underneath. "I mean it. Call me if you need anything." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice, and climbed out of the car. She watched as he drove away, then looked down at the business card in her hand. The embossed lettering read Daniel Carter, CEO, Carter Industries, and below that, a phone number written in pen. She tucked the card carefully into her wallet and went inside to get her daughter. Lily was fussy but not seriously ill, just a low-grade fever from teething. Emma gave her medicine, cuddled her close, and spent the evening trying not to think about Daniel Carter and his kind eyes and the way he had spoken to her like she mattered. But that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Emma pulled out the business card and stared at it for a long time. The next morning, Emma called in sick to work, knowing Margaret would be furious but having no choice. Lily's fever had not broken and the daycare would not take her. Emma spent the day alternating between caring for her daughter and worrying about her job, a familiar cycle of anxiety that felt like her constant companion. By evening, Lily was feeling better, and Emma's phone rang with a number she did not recognize. "Hello, Emma. It's Daniel Carter." Her heart jumped into her throat. "Hi. How did you get my number?" "I have my ways," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Actually, I called your office to see how you were doing and your coworker Jenna gave it to me. I hope that's all right." "It's fine," Emma said, sinking onto the couch. Lily was playing with blocks on the floor, babbling happily. "I'm just surprised. I wanted to check on you and on Lily. How is she?" "Better. It was just teething, thankfully. She'll be able to go back to daycare tomorrow." "That's good." There was a pause, and then Daniel said, "Emma, I'm going to be direct with you because I don't see the point in games. I'd like to take you to dinner. Just the two of us. A chance to talk without grocery stores or office buildings or any of the chaos." Emma's mouth went dry. "You want to take me on a date?" "Yes. I know this is probably unexpected, and I know you have a lot on your plate, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the grocery store. There's something about you that I'm drawn to, and I'd really like the chance to get to know you better." 1,000 reasons to say no flooded Emma's mind. They were from completely different worlds. She had a baby and barely enough money to survive while he was a millionaire CEO. She did not have time for dating. She did not have the energy for the inevitable heartbreak when he realized how complicated her life was. But underneath all those practical objections was a flutter of hope, a whisper of possibility that maybe, just maybe, something good could happen. "I'd have to find a babysitter," Emma said slowly, "and I don't have many options." "What if I came to you instead?" Daniel offered. "I could bring dinner, we could eat at your place after Lily goes to sleep. Low pressure, no need for a babysitter." It was thoughtful and practical, and Emma found herself smiling despite her nerves. "You'd be okay with that. It's not exactly a fancy restaurant." "I spend half my life in fancy restaurants for business meetings. Honestly, dinner on a couch with someone I actually want to talk to sounds perfect." Emma took a breath, letting herself take the risk. "Okay, yes, that sounds nice. Friday night, Friday works." After they hung up, Emma sat in stunned silence for a long moment. She had a date with Daniel Carter. A man who could have his pick of women, who lived in a world she could barely imagine, and he wanted to have dinner with her. Lily crawled over and pulled herself up using Emma's leg, grinning a gummy grin that showed her two bottom teeth. Emma picked her up and hugged her close. "What have we gotten ourselves into, baby girl?" she whispered. Friday evening arrived with terrifying speed. Emma spent the entire day cleaning her small apartment, trying to make it look less shabby and more charming. The space was tiny, just a one-bedroom that she and Lily shared with worn furniture and mismatched decorations. But it was clean and filled with love, and Emma had to hope that would be enough. She put Lily to bed at 7:30, going through their usual routine of bath, bottle, and lullabies. The baby fought sleep for a while, sensing Emma's nervous energy, but eventually drifted off in her crib. Daniel arrived at 8 o'clock exactly, carrying bags from what Emma recognized as one of the nicest Italian restaurants in the city. "Hi," she said, suddenly shy as she opened the door. "Hi," he replied, his smile warm and immediate. He was dressed more casually than she had seen him, in jeans and a dark sweater that somehow made him look even more handsome. "These are for you." He handed her a bouquet of flowers, simple white daisies mixed with greenery, and Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. No one had brought her flowers in longer than she could remember. "They're beautiful," she managed. "Come in. Sorry, it's not much." "It's perfect," Daniel said, stepping inside and looking around with genuine interest. "This is your home. That makes it perfect." They settled at Emma's small dining table, and Daniel unpacked containers of pasta, salad, and bread that smelled heavenly. As they ate, conversation flowed with surprising ease. Daniel asked about her life, really asked, listening intently as she talked about growing up with loving parents who had died too young, about falling for the wrong man who had left when things got real, about the fierce love she felt for Lily that made all the struggles worthwhile. "Tell me about building your company," Emma said, wanting to hear his story. "That must have been incredibly hard." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "It consumed my life for years. I didn't have time for relationships or friendships or anything that wasn't work. I told myself it was worth it, that I was honoring my father's memory, and in a way I was, but I also used it as an excuse to avoid really living." "What changed?" Emma asked. "Honestly, meeting you." He met her eyes, his gaze steady and sincere. "Seeing you in that grocery store, overwhelmed and exhausted but still so full of love for your daughter, it reminded me that there's more to life than business success. You were so real, Emma. No pretense, no playing games, just a person doing her best in a difficult situation." "I was a mess," Emma said, feeling her cheeks flush. "You were human, and it was the most attractive thing I'd seen in years." They talked for hours, long after the food was gone. Daniel told her about the pressure of running a company, about the loneliness of being at the top, about his nephews who he adored but did not get to see often enough. Emma shared stories about Lily's milestones, about the small joys that kept her going, about her dreams of maybe someday going back to school and finishing her degree. "What would you study?" Daniel asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. "I always wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school, maybe kindergarten. I love kids and I think I'd be good at it, but it's impossible right now. I can barely afford daycare, let alone tuition." Daniel was quiet for a moment, and Emma worried she had said too much, revealed too much about her financial struggles. But then he said, "What if it wasn't impossible? What if you had help?" "I can't accept money from you," Emma said immediately, panic rising. "That's not why I told you. I don't want you to think I'm looking for a handout." "That's not what I meant," Daniel said gently. "But Emma, I have resources. A lot of resources. And if I could help someone achieve their dreams, someone who works as hard as you do and deserves every opportunity, why wouldn't I? Not as charity, but as an investment in someone I care about." "You barely know me," Emma whispered. "I know enough," Daniel replied. "I know you're kind and strong and resilient. I know you love your daughter with everything you have. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up your whole face. And I know that I want to keep getting to know you if you'll let me." Emma felt tears prick her eyes for what felt like the 100th time this week. "I don't understand why you're being so nice to me." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "Because you deserve it. Because I like you. Because when I'm with you, I feel like myself in a way I haven't in years." He paused, then added with a small smile, "And because your daughter has excellent taste in strangers to trust in grocery stores." Emma laughed, a real laugh that released some of the tension coiled in her chest. "She does usually have terrible stranger danger instincts. I'm working on that." They moved to the couch, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Daniel asked to see pictures of Lily, and Emma pulled out her phone, showing him dozens of photos while telling stories about each one. He listened to every word, asked questions, and laughed at all the right moments. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said eventually, turning to face him. "Why aren't you with someone already? I can't imagine that women aren't constantly trying to date you." Daniel's expression turned wry. "They are. Or rather, they're trying to date the idea of me. The CEO, the money, the status. I've had enough relationships that were really just transactions to last a lifetime. No one saw me as just Daniel. I was always the Carter Industries Daniel, if that makes sense." "That sounds lonely," Emma said softly. "It was. It is." He met her eyes, and the vulnerability in his gaze made her heart ache. "But you looked at me in that grocery store like I was just a person. You didn't know who I was, and you let me hold your baby anyway. Do you know how rare that is?" How valuable. I was desperate, Emma said with a slight smile. You were trusting. There's a difference. Daniel shifted closer, and Emma was acutely aware of the warmth of his body, the way he smelled faintly of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. Emma, I want to be clear about what I'm asking for here. I don't want casual. I don't want to be another complication in your life. I want to be someone who makes things easier, who supports you, who's there for you and for Lily. I know that's a lot to put on a first date, but I'm too old and too tired to play games. Emma's breath caught. I have a baby. My life is complicated. I can't just date casually and see where things go. Everything I do has to be about what's best for her. I understand that. And I'm telling you that I'm willing to be part of that equation. Not as someone who swoops in and tries to take over, but as someone who wants to be part of your lives. If you'll have me. It was too much, too fast, and yet somehow it felt right. Emma thought about the kindness Daniel had shown her, the way he listened when she talked, the respect in his eyes when he looked at her. She thought about Lily and what she deserved, not just financially but emotionally. A man who would treat them both well, who would show up and be present. I'm scared, Emma admitted. I've been hurt before and I can't go through that again. And more importantly, I can't let Lily get attached to someone who's going to leave. I won't make promises I can't keep, Daniel said seriously. I can't predict the future and I won't lie and say there's no way we won't work out. But I can promise you that I'll never leave without trying. I'll never give up at the first sign of difficulty. And I'll never, ever treat you as less than you are, which is extraordinary. Emma felt something shift inside her, some wall she had built crumbling just slightly. I'd like to keep seeing you, but we need to take it slow, especially where Lily is concerned. As slow as you need, Daniel agreed. I'm not going anywhere. He left shortly after, with a gentle kiss on Emma's cheek that felt like a promise. And Emma closed the door behind him feeling lighter than she had in months. Over the next several weeks, Daniel became a steady presence in Emma's life. He texted her good morning every day, called in the evenings just to talk, and found small ways to make her life easier without being overbearing. He arranged for dinner to be delivered on nights when Emma was too exhausted to cook. He sent flowers to her office, which made Margaret raise her eyebrows but say nothing. He showed up to help when Emma's car broke down, arranging for it to be towed and repaired without being asked. But more than the practical help, he gave Emma something she had been missing for so long, someone to talk to, someone who cared about her day, someone who made her feel valued and seen. They went on actual dates when Emma could arrange babysitting, which was rare and expensive. But Daniel was equally happy to come to her apartment after Lily went to bed, bringing takeout and his full attention. They talked about everything, his work, her dreams, their childhoods, their fears and hopes. 6 weeks into their relationship, Emma finally let Daniel meet Lily properly. She had been so nervous about it, worried that Lily would be clingy or fussy, or that Daniel would be uncomfortable. But when he arrived on Saturday morning with a stuffed elephant toy and a genuine smile, Lily had warmed to him almost immediately. "Hey, Lily," Daniel said softly, crouching down to her level. "I'm Daniel. I've heard so much about you." Lily, who was usually shy with strangers, studied him seriously for a moment, then reached for the elephant. Daniel handed it to her, and she hugged it close before giving him a gummy smile. "I think you passed the test," Emma said, relief and affection flooding through her. They spent the day together, the three of them, doing simple things that felt momentous. They went to the park and watched Lily toddle around on unsteady legs, laughing when she fell on her diaper-padded bottom. They got lunch at a family restaurant where Lily threw food on the floor and babbled loudly, and Daniel did not seem bothered at all. They went back to Emma's apartment, and Daniel sat on the floor playing blocks with Lily while Emma prepared dinner. Watching them together, seeing how gentle and patient Daniel was with her daughter, Emma felt her heart expanding in a way that was both wonderful and terrifying. She was falling in love with him. Maybe she had been since the grocery store, but now it was undeniable. After Lily went to bed, Daniel pulled Emma onto the couch and kissed her properly for the first time. It was slow and sweet and full of promise, and when they broke apart, Emma was breathless. "I'm falling for you," Daniel said, his forehead resting against hers. "I need you to know that. This isn't casual for me, Emma. You and Lily, you're becoming everything." "I'm falling for you too," Emma whispered, "and it scares me." "It scares me too," he admitted, "but the good things usually do." Time passed in a way that felt both fast and perfect. Daniel became a regular fixture in Emma's and Lily's life, showing up for bedtime routines and weekend outings. He met Jenna, who declared him absolutely perfect and told Emma she would be insane to let him go. He even met Margaret, though that encounter was brief and frosty on Margaret's end. The relationship was not without challenges. There were moments when Emma felt insecure about their different financial situations, times when she worried she was not sophisticated enough for his world. There were scheduling conflicts and exhausted evenings when Lily was teething and Emma had no energy left to give. But Daniel was patient through all of it. He never made Emma feel less than. He showed up consistently, proving with actions rather than just words that he was committed. And slowly, Emma let herself believe that this could really work. 4 months into their relationship, Daniel took Emma to meet his family. His mother lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs, and his sister and her 2 sons were there as well. Emma was nervous, sure that they would judge her or find her lacking, but Daniel's family welcomed her warmly. "Daniel hasn't brought anyone to meet us in years," his mother, Patricia, said warmly as she served coffee. "You must be very special." "She is," Daniel said simply, his hand finding Emma's under the table. His nephews, ages 6 and 8, were loud and energetic, and they immediately wanted to play with Lily. Emma watched carefully, making sure they were gentle, and was touched by how seriously they took the responsibility of entertaining the baby. "They're good kids," Daniel's sister, Rebecca, said, sitting beside Emma. "And Daniel is a good man. I know his life seems glamorous from the outside, but he's been lonely for a long time. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I haven't seen him this happy in years." "He makes me happy too," Emma said, watching Daniel help his youngest nephew stack blocks while holding Lily on his other knee. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong, but he's just consistently wonderful." "Then maybe stop waiting for disaster and let yourself enjoy it," Rebecca suggested gently. "You both deserve that." The visit went well, and on the drive home, Daniel was quiet in a way that seemed thoughtful rather than upset. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, Lily asleep in her car seat in the back. "How much I love you," Daniel said simply. "How much I love both of you. And how I want to figure out a way to make this permanent." Emma's heart stuttered. "Daniel, I'm not proposing right now," he said quickly, glancing at her with a slight smile. "I know it's too soon for that, but I'm telling you that's where my head is. That's where my heart is. I want a future with you, Emma. I want to be part of Lily's life, really part of it. I want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every night." Tears sprang to Emma's eyes. "I want that too. I'm just scared of relying on someone and having them leave." "I know. And I'll keep proving to you that I'm not going anywhere, for as long as it takes." 6 months into their relationship, Emma's financial situation, which had always been precarious, took a sharp turn for the worse. Her car, which had been repaired once already, finally died completely. The repairs would cost more than the car was worth, and Emma could not afford a new one. Taking the bus added 2 hours to her daily commute, time she did not have and exhaustion she could not spare. She tried to handle it on her own, tried not to burden Daniel with her problems. But he noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Talk to me," he said one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "You've been stressed all week. What's going on?" Emma told him about the car, about the impossible choice between going into debt or making her life significantly harder. She told him about how Margaret was threatening to fire her if she was late one more time, and how she was terrified of losing the job that barely paid enough but was at least stable. "Let me help," Daniel said immediately. "I can't take money from you," Emma replied, the familiar argument. "It's not right." "Why not? I have resources I'm not even using. A car sitting in my garage that I never drive. Emma, this isn't about charity or pity. This is about me caring about you and wanting to make your life easier. Please let me help." They argued about it, not angrily but passionately. Emma trying to maintain her independence, and Daniel trying to make her understand that accepting help was not weakness. Finally, Emma broke down crying, all the stress and fear and exhaustion pouring out. "I don't want you to think I'm with you for your money. I don't want to be that person." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Emma, listen to me. I have never once thought that. You tried to refuse dinner, remember? You've never asked me for anything. You've been so determined to do everything yourself that it's killing you. Please, let me be your partner. Let me carry some of this weight." "I don't know how," Emma whispered against his chest. "I've been on my own for so long. I know, but you're not on your own anymore. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Please trust me." Eventually, Emma agreed to let Daniel help with the car situation. He gave her one of his spare vehicles, a practical sedan that was still nicer than anything Emma had ever owned but not so flashy that she felt uncomfortable driving it. He framed it as a loan, though Emma suspected he had no intention of ever taking it back. The gesture meant more than just transportation. It meant Emma could get to work on time, could pick up Lily without a 2-hour commute, could breathe a little easier. And more importantly, it meant she was learning to accept help, to let someone else support her for once. Margaret's attitude toward Emma shifted noticeably after Daniel's visit to the office. She was not warm exactly, but she stopped making snide comments about Emma's schedule and even offered a small raise. Emma suspected Daniel had said something during his meeting with the company executives, and while part of her bristled at the idea of needing his intervention, she was mostly just grateful. As fall turned to winter, Emma's life began to feel less like a constant struggle and more like something sustainable. She was not drowning anymore. She had Daniel, who had become her best friend and partner in addition to being the man she loved. She had stability, both emotional and financial. And Lily was thriving, a happy toddler who had started calling Daniel Dada without any prompting, which made them both emotional in different ways. One December evening, Daniel came over for dinner as usual. Lily was already in bed, and Emma had attempted to cook something more ambitious than usual, though the results were questionable. "It's a little burned," Emma admitted, looking at the chicken she had pulled from the oven. "It looks perfect," Daniel said loyally, pulling her into a kiss. "I've been thinking about something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not, I promise. Emma, I know we've only been together for 8 months, but they've been the best 8 months of my life. You and Lily have changed everything for me. You've made me remember what really matters." Emma's heart started pounding. "Daniel, I want you to move in with me," he said in a rush. "Both of you. I have a house that's way too big for one person, with a yard where Lily could play and a room that would be perfect for a nursery. You could quit your job with Margaret and focus on going back to school if you wanted, Or keep working if that's what you prefer, but without the financial stress. Emma, I want to build a life with you. A real life together. Emma stared at him, overwhelmed. That's a huge step. I know. And if it's too fast, tell me. We can wait. But I'm ready, Emma. I've been ready. What about Lily? She's not your responsibility. She's absolutely my responsibility, Daniel said firmly. I love her like she's mine. I know I'm not her biological father, and I'll never try to erase or replace him, but I want to be her dad in all the ways that matter, if you'll let me. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. I love you. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for everything you've done for us. But moving in together, combining our lives like that, it's terrifying. I know it is, but we can be terrified together. Daniel took her hands, his expression open and earnest. I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I'm just asking you to think about it. To consider that maybe we could have the kind of life together that we both deserve. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Daniel pulled her into his arms, and they stood in the tiny kitchen of her apartment, holding each other while the burned chicken cooled on the counter. Over the next few weeks, Emma thought about Daniel's offer constantly. She talked to Jenna, who was enthusiastically in favor. She made lists of pros and cons, trying to be logical about what was fundamentally an emotional decision. She watched Daniel with Lily, seeing the genuine love and care in every interaction. And slowly, Emma realized that her fear was not about whether Daniel would leave. It was about allowing herself to have something good, something stable, something she did not have to fight for every single day. She had spent so long in survival mode that she had forgotten what it felt like to actually live. On Christmas Eve, Emma asked Daniel to come over after Lily went to sleep. She had decided, and she needed to tell him before she lost her nerve. Daniel arrived with presents for Lily, which he placed carefully under Emma's small tree. Then he turned to her, and Emma could see the question in his eyes, the hope he was trying not to show too much. I've been thinking about what you said, Emma began, her voice shaking slightly. About moving in together. Okay, Daniel said carefully, giving her space to speak. I'm scared. I'm terrified, actually, but I'm also tired of letting fear make my decisions. You've been nothing but wonderful to me and to Lily. You've proven over and over that you're committed, that you're not going anywhere. Emma took a deep breath. So yes, we'll move in with you if the offer still stands. Daniel's face broke into a smile so bright it made Emma's heart ache. The offer absolutely still stands. Emma, you have no idea how happy you've just made me. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Emma let herself fall into it, into the certainty that this was right. They moved in together in January, a process that was chaotic and stressful but also filled with joy. Daniel's house was beautiful, a modern home with huge windows and space that seemed almost obscene after Emma's tiny apartment. Lily loved it immediately, toddling through rooms and laughing at the echoes. Emma quit her job with Margaret, who seemed unsurprised and vaguely relieved. And with Daniel's support, Emma enrolled in online classes to start working toward her teaching degree. It was strange and wonderful to have time, to have energy for something other than just surviving. They settled into a rhythm, learning how to be a family. Daniel worked from home more often, wanting to be present for Lily's milestones. Emma studied and took care of the house and slowly let herself believe that this was real, that it was lasting. In March, just over a year after Emma had asked a stranger to hold her baby in a grocery store, Daniel took her to dinner at an elegant restaurant downtown. Emma's first real night out in longer than she could remember. Over dessert, Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Emma, I need to ask you something. Emma's heart started racing. Okay, you changed my life. You and Lily walked into it when I was successful but empty, when I had everything except what actually mattered. You showed me what love looks like, what family means. You've been patient with me while I learned how to be part of your lives, and you've let me love Lily like she's mine." Daniel stood up, and Emma realized with shock that he was moving to kneel beside the table. Several other diners noticed, smiling and watching. "Emma, I love you more than I thought possible. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, raising Lily together and whatever other children we might have. I want to be your husband, your partner, your family." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a beautiful but not ostentatious diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Emma was crying, nodding before she could even speak. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her while the restaurant applauded. Emma laughed through her tears, overwhelmed and grateful and so deeply in love she could hardly breathe. They were married 4 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Lily was the flower girl, toddling down the aisle in a white dress and throwing petals everywhere, except where they were supposed to go. Emma wore a simple white gown and carried white roses, and when she saw Daniel waiting for her at the altar with tears in his eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every hardship, every moment of fear and doubt had been worth it to get here. Daniel's vows made her cry. He promised to love her and Lily for the rest of his life, to be the partner and father they deserved, to never take for granted the gift of their family. Emma's vows were similar, promising to trust him, to let him support her, to build a life together that honored both their pasts and their future. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Daniel kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and Emma felt something settle deep in her soul. She was home. They honeymooned as a family, taking Lily to a beach resort where she discovered her love of sand and water. Emma and Daniel spent their days playing with their daughter, and their nights talking and planning and dreaming about the future. Emma finished her degree over the next 2 years, graduating with honors. Daniel was in the audience with Lily, who was now 3 years old and thrilled to see her mama on stage. Emma got a job teaching kindergarten at a school near their home, work that filled her heart in ways she had not imagined. When Lily was 4, Emma and Daniel welcomed a son, Noah, into their family. Daniel was there for every moment of the pregnancy and birth, supportive and excited and deeply in love with their growing family. Lily was thrilled to be a big sister, helping carefully with bottles and diapers and singing to her baby brother in a slightly off-key voice that made everyone smile. Emma sometimes looked at her life and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. She had a husband who loved her unconditionally, who had never once made her feel like she was less than because of her past or her struggles. She had 2 beautiful children who were healthy and happy. She had work she loved and financial security, and a home filled with laughter. But more than any of that, she had partnership. She had someone who carried the weight with her, who showed up every single day, who proved with actions that love was not just a feeling but a choice you made over and over. 5 years after that day in the grocery store, Emma and Daniel were at home on a Saturday morning. Lily, now 6, was teaching Noah how to build with blocks. Daniel was making breakfast while Emma sat at the kitchen island, drinking coffee and watching her family with contentment settling warm in her chest. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Just how far we have come. How different my life is now compared to that day when I asked you to hold Lily while I paid." Daniel smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart skip. "Best decision you ever made, asking a stranger for help." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes when you asked me to dinner," Emma corrected. "And saying yes when you proposed, and saying yes to every day with you since then. "Mama, Daddy, look," Lily called, pointing proudly at the tower she and Noah had built. It was lopsided and precarious, but they had worked on it together. "That is amazing," Emma called back, and Daniel echoed her praise. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Daniel and Emma sat in the living room, her feet in his lap while he rubbed them absently. The comfortable silence between them was one of Emma's favorite things, the kind that only came from truly knowing someone. "Thank you," Emma said suddenly. Daniel looked at her curiously. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was at my lowest. For being kind when you did not have to be. For loving Lily before you even knew us. For being patient while I learned to trust. For building this life with me." Emma's voice cracked slightly. "For everything, Daniel." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You don't have to thank me for loving you, Emma. It's the easiest thing I have ever done." "Still," she insisted, "I want you to know that I see it, all of it. Every morning you wake up with Noah, every tea party you sit through with Lily, every time you support my dreams, every single moment you choose us. I see it, and I love you for it." "I love you too," Daniel murmured against her hair. "More every day." And as Emma settled into his embrace, listening to the quiet house and the even breathing of her children sleeping safely upstairs, she thought about how life could change in the most unexpected ways. How a desperate moment in a grocery store could lead to everything she had ever wanted but been afraid to hope for. She had asked a stranger to hold her baby, not knowing he would end up holding her heart, not knowing he would become her partner, her husband, her family, not knowing that one moment of vulnerability would lead to a lifetime of love. But that was the thing about love, Emma had learned. It often came when you least expected it, in forms you did not anticipate. It required courage and trust and the willingness to be vulnerable. It required seeing past circumstances and bank accounts and the surface-level differences to the person underneath. Daniel had seen her, really seen her. And she had seen him, not the millionaire CEO, but the man who was kind to strangers, patient with crying babies, and brave enough to want more than just success. They had built something real together, something lasting. And every day, they chose it again. Chose each other, chose their family, chose love. Emma could not imagine a better happily ever after than that. She fell asleep that night in Daniel's arms, grateful for grocery stores and terrible days and the courage it had taken to ask for help. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings, and the man who had become her everything. Their story had started with a simple question from a struggling mother to a stranger, but it had become something beautiful. A love story built on kindness, strengthened by commitment, and sealed with the promise that no matter what came, they would face it together. And they did. For all the years that followed, through challenges and celebrations, through the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones, Daniel and Emma chose each other. They built a family, a home, and a love that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we are brave enough to ask for help and open enough to accept it. Lily grew up knowing Daniel as her father in every way that mattered. He adopted her legally when she was 7, and she proudly took his last name. Noah grew up in a house filled with love and laughter, with parents who showed him what partnership looked like. And when both children were older, Emma and Daniel told them the story of how they met, about a grocery store and a crying baby and a moment of kindness that changed everything. "So Mama just gave me to a stranger?" Lily asked, scandalized and delighted in equal measure. "I was desperate," Emma laughed. "And your daddy had a trustworthy face." "I prefer to think it was my natural charm," Daniel said, pulling Emma close and kissing the top of her head. Their children groaned good-naturedly at the display of affection, but Emma saw the way they smiled too. They were growing up knowing what love looked like, what commitment meant. They were learning that family was not just about biology but about showing up, about choosing each other every day. And that was the greatest gift Emma and Daniel could give them. The knowledge that love was possible, that it was worth fighting for, and that sometimes it came from the most unexpected places, transforming everything in the most beautiful ways. Years later, when Emma was teaching her kindergarten class and Daniel was still running his company but with more balance and presence at home, when Lily was preparing for college and Noah was navigating middle school, Emma still sometimes thought about that day in the grocery store. She thought about how close she had come to refusing Daniel's help, to letting pride or fear stop her from accepting kindness. She thought about all the ways her life could have gone differently if she had said no, if she had not trusted him, if she had not been brave enough to take a chance. But she had said yes. To help, to dinner, to love, to a future she had not been sure she deserved but had been willing to reach for anyway. And in saying yes, in being brave enough to be vulnerable, Emma had found everything she had ever wanted and so much more than she had ever dreamed possible. That was the real story. Not about a millionaire falling for a struggling single mother, though that was part of it, but about two people seeing each other, really seeing each other, and choosing to build something together. About kindness leading to connection, connection leading to love, and love leading to a family that was strong and real and absolutely worth every moment of fear and doubt it had taken to get there. Emma and Daniel's love story proved that the best relationships were not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. They were about showing up, about being present, about seeing someone's worth even when they could not see it themselves. They were about partnership and trust and the willingness to carry each other's burdens. And most importantly, they were about being brave enough to ask for help and generous enough to offer it. Because sometimes, all it took was one moment of connection, one act of kindness, one willingness to see past the surface to the person beneath. Emma had asked a stranger to hold her baby while she paid, not knowing he was a millionaire CEO. But more importantly, not knowing he would become her best friend, her partner, her husband, and the father her daughter needed. Not knowing that a moment of desperation would lead to a lifetime of love. And Daniel had offered to help an overwhelmed mother in a grocery store, not knowing she would become his whole world. Not knowing that holding a crying baby for 2 minutes would lead to a family he had not known he was missing. Not knowing that kindness would grow into the kind of love that changed everything. Together, they built a life that honored both their stories. Emma's strength and resilience, forged in the fires of single motherhood and financial struggle. Daniel's success and generosity, tempered by loneliness and the search for real connection. They brought their whole selves to the relationship, holding nothing back, and created something neither could have built alone. Their happily ever after was not perfect. There were still hard days, still disagreements and challenges and moments of stress. But they faced it all together, with the certainty that came from years of showing up for each other. They had built trust, not in a moment but in the 1,000 small ways they chose each other every single day. And when Emma looked at her life, at the man sleeping beside her and the children safe in their rooms and the career she loved and the security she had never thought possible, she felt overwhelming gratitude, not just for what she had, but for the courage it had taken to accept it. For being willing to trust, to be vulnerable, to let someone help carry the weight. That day in the grocery store had been one of her hardest. She had been at the end of her rope, exhausted and overwhelmed and so desperately alone. But it had also been the beginning of everything good that followed. Because sometimes, the moments that feel like breaking points are actually turning points. Sometimes, The times we feel weakest are when we find the strength to accept help. And sometimes, asking a stranger to hold your baby while you pay leads to a love story that lasts a lifetime. Emma and Daniel lived that truth every day in the life they built together and the love they shared. They proved that happily ever after was not about fairy tales or perfection. It was about finding someone who saw you, really saw you, and chose to stay. Someone who carried the weight with you and celebrated the joy with you, and showed up for all the ordinary moments in between. They proved that love could come from unexpected places and grow into something extraordinary. That kindness mattered, that vulnerability was strength, and that being brave enough to ask for help could change absolutely everything. And they lived happily ever after, not because their life was perfect, but because they faced it together. Hand in hand, heart to heart, building a family and a future one choice at a time. Always choosing each other, always choosing love, from that day in the grocery store to every day that followed. That was their story. A love story that started with a crying baby and a stranger's kindness, and grew into a lifetime of partnership, family, and joy. The kind of story that proved that sometimes, the best things in life come when we are brave enough to be vulnerable and open enough to receive the help and love we deserve. Emma and Daniel never forgot where they started. They held onto the memory of that grocery store, that moment of connection, as a reminder of how far they had come and how grateful they were for every step of the journey. And they passed that lesson on to their children, teaching them that kindness mattered, that asking for help was brave, and that love could come from the most unexpected places if you were open to receiving it. Their story became part of their family's foundation, a testament to the power of compassion and the beauty of taking chances on people and possibilities. It reminded them all that life could change in an instant, that one moment of kindness could ripple out into years of love, and that the best adventures often started with a single brave choice to trust. And so Emma and Daniel lived there happily ever after, grateful for grocery stores and crying babies and the courage it took to ask a stranger for help. Grateful for each other, for their children, for the life they built together. Grateful for every moment, from the hardest to the happiest, because it had all led them here. Together, exactly where they were meant to be,